Good evening, everyone. Thank you to our committee members for coming out, and thank you to our special guest, County Legislator Nancy Barr. And good evening to, of course, to the public who will be watching this later for our first meeting of 2023. I'm glad to be back after our December recess. We have, again, as I said, our special guest, County Legislator Barr, to give us an update on some legislation she's working on at the county level. So I will turn it over to her to update the committee and the public.
Thank you so much, Greg. And it's great to see, as I said before some of you joined, it's nice to be in a meeting with my friends, and it's really, it's fun. So the reason I wanted to talk to you tonight is because we are getting close to having a public hearing on this legislation, which I think Debbie has told you a little bit about, and I know I've mentioned to a couple of you that we call, just our little nickname for it is upon request, but it has a very boring name of single-use foodware law. And the idea behind it is that if you want any type of cutlery, or you want salt or pepper or ketchup or soy sauce or whatever, and you're taking out from a restaurant or a deli or any food service establishment, you need to ask for it. So the idea will be that you don't have the experience I have when I go to Rye Brook Deli and get my bacon, egg, and cheese on a roll, which I do a couple of times a week, and they give me all salt, pepper, all the silverware in a plastic sleeve, and I don't need any of it. And I've told them I don't need it. I'll tell them ahead of time, and they still give it to me because it's a very sort of robotic, automatic process. So interestingly, this idea came up. I mean, it's something we've talked about before, but this year, one of my colleagues was talking to a new restaurant group that is formed in another part of the county, and they were talking about how expensive it is to get these things, especially post COVID. It's really a drag, and so we realized that we have this opportunity right now to have a win for the environmental side and win for businesses. It's one of those things where we can get business buy-in because they'll save money if they don't have to give it out to everybody. And the one thing that they don't like to have to do, and I think Rye Brook was great when you rolled out your plastic and paper bag law, was you provided those little signs, or that said we have to do this because Rye Brook is making us do this as of June. I think you provided them, and I saw them in a few places, but basically it takes the onus off the businesses, so customers see, okay, this is the new law, we have to do it. And so we plan to do something similar. We also plan to have a very long lead time, 6 months after it's passed, and then 6 months where there'll be sort of warnings and not, actual fines. So it is going to be enforced through our Department of Health, which already inspects these places and already has the ability to give out, violation notices and to charge fines. But this is not something that, we're looking to make money off of. We hope we make no money off of it, because we hope that, once all the businesses are informed and once customers are informed, and, everybody will be happy, as long as, in the beginning, you could see someone who doesn't know about the law walking away and not having the things they expect to have, because it's always thrown in there. So we want to do a big education effort on it. And that's part of the reason we gave such a long lead time. There are a couple of exceptions, and I will make sure you have a copy of it once we voted out of committee. We had a couple of meetings on it before the new year, and we've made a couple of changes, but there are a few exceptions, you know, when there's a public health crisis, not overall, but there's the, you know, ability for the health department to say, you know, there's a health crisis and, you know, we're suspending this law for a period of time, or in congregate care settings where they may need to use disposable stuff for, you know, health reasons. You don't have to ask for it. You know, we're not going to ask nursing home, you know, patients to say, can you give me a plastic spoon, please? And we're not requiring them to not use plastic. So, I mean, it's not as, you know, it's not as restrictive as some people might like to see it, but it's reasonable. And we think that that's a good way to get compliance. The only two things that are actually banned are the plastic stirrers. So you can still use those, you know, they can still give you those little cardboardy things, wooden things, I don't know what they're made out of, that are not plastic. And also the things that you get mainly from Starbucks, those plastic sort of stoppers that keep the drink, supposed to keep it warm and also keep it from spilling. But, you know, we all live without them for a very long time. I think, you know, we can manage. Okay, so those were the two things that would actually just be banned outright. And that's the main, you know, those are the main points of the law. And I just wanted to make sure that you all are aware of it. And obviously, if anybody wants to, you know, when you get the copy of it, if you have any comments you want to share, either with me or in the public hearing setting, you know, great. When we actually pass it, we'll probably want to do some sort of announcement. It probably at some, you know, at a restaurant or something. So, you know, we may be able to do that in Rye Brook if that's something that, you know, we want to do. And if you know of a restaurant or a deli or something that would like to do that, let me know. And I think that's really, you know, those are the main points. So if anybody has any questions, happy to answer them. Comments. Straws obviously are also included in this. And I will say one thing, you know, there's a group of students who you may be aware of in Larchmont, and they are doing, they have a program in the schools, which might be the Mamaroneck schools actually, but they are, okay, Debbie's nodding because she was with me for their presentation, but they have something that I would say is akin to what we have as a science research program, but it's like a social science research program. And they decided to do their project on single use utensils, and they got some local restaurants there to switch to things that were compostable and, you know, they did, you know, surveys, and they, you know, they took notes and they wrote it up, and they found that, you know, people really, you know, liked it. And most of the restaurants that were a part of that program decided to stay with it even after their little pilot. And they're very interested in this. They made a suggestion that we thought was very good, and we put it into the law, and then we got yelled at and we took it out. But they wanted us to specifically say that we specifically have said that you can't lump the items together and provide them in a plastic bag. So like those little things where you get fork, knife, spoon, salt and pepper, because people have to ask for specific things. And you know, if they ask for a fork, you can't give them all of that. So they wanted something that would also say, and you can't wrap, you know, the individual fork, spoon, knife in plastic either. Well, apparently our health department goes around and tells a lot of establishments that if they're going to have self-service stations, which we do allow, that it has to be wrapped separately in plastic or something. And so they did not want us to say that you couldn't do that. And they actually said, that goes against our health department regulations and so forth. So we took that out and we're just silent on that point. Obviously, if people use those dispensers where you get one fork at a time, that's a great solution to not having, just them all over the place and falling on the floor or whatever. So just pointing out that particular thing in case that comes to your mind as you're reading it. We did have it in, but we took it back out. So I think that's it. Any comments, questions?
Sounds great. I'm glad that you guys specifically talked about the little stoppers because I hate those. It's like it's literally a 1-second thing. Like they hand it to you and you immediately take it out. You're like, why did you give this to me?
It's so
it's
true.
So annoying when you didn't ask for it and it's just like in the drink and you're like, what do I do with this? So
right. Yeah, exactly. And one of our colleagues, when we were talking about it in the committee, said, well, what are we going to do, if we don't have that? And we're like, just tell them not to fill it up so high if you're worried about it spilling over. I mean, I really, don't think
Starbucks is the only place that I go to a lot of local coffee shops.
Mm-hmm.
And Starbucks is the only one that I've actually seen that does that so far. I'm sure there are maybe other places, but it seems to be mostly Starbucks.
I think it is. I think you're right. I do. And they, they operate in some places and some that don't allow it. So, I mean, usually they're pretty good about making those kinds of adjustments. So I don't think that'll be a problem. Also, there is language about the apps that restaurants use, which already have options for, saying if you want silverware, napkins, and that sort of thing. But that, that is part of it that, you should have that specified. And we have talked to some of those services, and they, again, the ones that are national, like, Grubhub, they have that capability because they operate in some places that require those questions to be asked. So I think, it should be a fairly smooth transition.
How do people, let's say there is a restaurant that's not following the rules. How do you want people to report this? Is there going to be like a website? Because that's, I think, one of the problems. Like, for instance, with the New York State plastic bag ban, there's the Ulta in the Port Chester Shopping Center.
Mm-hmm.
They've consistently given out. I've talked to them. I've reported them, and nothing has happened. Like, they have been giving out the plastic. They don't care, and so it seems like it goes nowhere.
Yeah.
Like, stop doing that, and they automatically want to give you one even if you don't ask for one. So I always wonder, I'm like, what's the most effective way for people to, report something like this, if they do see somebody that continuously gives out utensils or whatever.
Yeah.
They don't want them.
So at the state level, I think it's harder because they don't have, people on the ground, and there's really not a good person to report it to. At the county level, if it's a county law, you can, I would recommend call me, and then we will, we will tell our health department, you should check out X restaurant because apparently they're, giving this out, and they'll do that, and they'll, give a warning, and then if they'll go back again and see if, if it's being followed. I mean, you can call the health department directly, but I think it probably is easier to just call me or Debbie.
Yeah. And I'm sure nobody wants the health inspector at their restaurant more than they need them there. So.
Yeah, no, and again, I don't think, we didn't, we worked with our health department to make sure that it's something that they can enforce and that they, it doesn't require them to hire more people because they're already in there. At least once a year they have to check. And for other things. And so they'll, review then what's going on. And and then they will take calls. So hopefully we won't have that same problem that you're having with Ulta.
Yeah.
I
I
will
know.
say though, it's so much nicer without all those plastic bags. I saw one
Yeah.
flying in the parking lot here today and I'm like, wow, I haven't seen that in a while. It was-
Yeah.
it was
You're
nice.
like, where'd that come from?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, and I know on our own like micro level here, just in Rye Brook with because we of course, as you know, we have a similar sort of thing that
Mhm.
we did. And there's still some restaurants that I see that give out that have the stuff out they're not supposed to, or they put the straws in without asking. But I think the majority of them do abide by it.
Mhm.
So at least it reduces it a significant amount, even if
Yes.
it's not perfect, it just helps. So
It does, and it raises awareness for people that are not normally thinking about these things, but it makes them think twice because, they it just makes them more aware of
Mhm.
what they're using and not using, and no need to waste it. I mean, we brought the first meeting we had on this in committee, my colleague Erica and I both brought in like our collection of all this stuff that we've gotten from restaurants that we don't use, and we just save it, but it just sits in a closet somewhere piling up. And we just like poured, dumped it out on the committee table. And it was just from two people over a short period of time. We had a huge pile of things like that. And then one of our colleagues said, well, I know a place that will take the little ketchup packets. And, she took some of the stuff with her. But yeah, I think it's, I say it's a no-brainer, but there's always going to be somebody who's complaining about it. But
And
I
with
think it-
microplastics and how that's starting to be more and more of a concern, these really small, tiny pieces of like the stoppers and the little straw, the stir straw
Right.
things and stuff, those can have a really big impact just because of how small they are and how small they break down to really quickly into like our waterways and all those sorts of things. So yeah, I think
Yeah.
that's great.
And another piece of it is that, in Westchester, so we don't have landfills, but we do have an incinerator, and it, burning anything but, plastic in particular releases all kinds of good stuff, as you know. And that incinerator is in Peekskill, and the poor folks in Peekskill have, Indian Point, which even though it's closed, there's still those wonderful, remains and the rods that stay there forever. And they have this incinerator, and it's, they're not happy. And, ultimately we'd like to be doing something else besides burning all the waste. And unfortunately that incinerator gets not just our waste, but they just, other, states can bring stuff over, or other counties can bring stuff over. So even if we reduce our waste dramatically, they'll get it from somewhere else. So, I mean, not using unnecessary plastic, or, not having it in the waste stream, there's, as I know, speaking to the, people who know more than I do about it, but in addition to all those other things, we have people in Westchester who live right next door to these incinerators, and that's not healthy. So
Yeah.
I feel like comparing this legislation to the plastic bag ban, I think there might be a greater challenge with this single-use plastic, where with making sure that the communication gets to the people who actually do that, because if bags are being packed with deliverables, it's usually someone who might be a delivery person, a non-native English speaker, and obviously the material is going to be available because it can be given out on request.
right.
So since it's not like a plastic bag, okay, well then whoever is putting the stuff together, the plastic bag's not there, they don't have a plastic bag to use.
Right.
This is where a decision has to be being made. And so unless the person doing it like understands that this is a requirement, it's going to be harder. So like the communication, strategy and approach is going to be a little different. Like I said, needs to really be like multilingual, and like any signage needs to be very much more multilingual. That's all.
No, it's a very fair point. And yes, training of this, staff is going to be key. But again, it's, if we come up with some simple, guidelines
Mhm.
that, they can hang up in multiple languages, or in at
Yeah.
very least in English and Spanish. Hopefully it won't be that hard to train people. But you're right, because some people will want
It's
it.
like you
and-
said, they're just people are on autopilot,
Right.
and you might feel like if they're packing a bag, well, better safe than sorry, I'll just throw it in.
Yeah, I'm sure that'll happen a lot at first. Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. So I hope everyone's supportive. I hope this, meets with your approval. And again, any other,
Nothing wrong with trying.
Yeah.
we're trying.
It'll make a dent.
Yeah,
It's not perfect.
every little bit helps.
Mhm.
And if you have any other suggestions, you know where to find me, and you know where to find Debbie. So
Thank you, Nancy. We really appreciate you coming to talk to us about that. It's
thank
exciting.
you.
Thank you,
Thank
Legislator
you.
Barr, for your time. But again, if there's anything, Deputy Legislator Barr, that either you want to send me in terms of schedules, I can be happy to post it on our social media sites and our newsletter, just to
Great,
publicity.
great. Thank you so much. Really appreciate it.
But thank you for your time.
Talk to you soon.
Okay, thanks.
Bye-bye. Oh.
Rick, did you want to introduce the leaf blower?
Yeah, sure.
Okay.
I will talk briefly and then I'll turn it back over to you, Bridget. So just to let everybody here know, Trustee Fisher, just hop on. Thank you for joining us, Trustee Fisher. So yes, so myself, Bridget, as well as our administrator, village administrator for Stradbury, and then Deputy Mayor David Heiser had another meeting with our Landscape Association, because then I sent the New York State Landscape Association what the committee had approved to send to the board, which is what we showed the board as a discussion item back in the November meeting. And they stated they had some concerns. So in the meeting, we listened to their concerns, and there are some just points that I think it's possible that, of course, depending on whatever the committee wants to do, see what we can revise that satisfies those concerns. And then there are just a couple of points where, they're just going to we're just going to have to agree to disagree in terms of certain points of the legislation. But again, I will turn it back over to Bridget just to get just some legislative points for recap. And then we will open the floor for discussion of what those concerns they had and what we could potentially do to address them.
Yeah, so we had, it was a good meeting, I think a lot of it was also us explaining to them what the legislation was, because I think they assume that, they assume it's going to go a certain way. And of course, what we've written up is all suggestions, so it can be changed. They asked for specifically two things. One was they wanted electric blowers to be allowed throughout the year. And they also wanted to not have exemptions for schools, golf courses, those sorts of things. What do you guys think about
They
that?
did want, you're saying they did want exemptions for schools and golf courses?
No, they don't. They think it's unfair to them that they get to use it, but they don't, it's like,
I get it.
yeah. So
Because
that
they're
was
not
kind of the
working-
point.
because
It's like,
they're
oh,
not
it's not
working?
fair to us because
Do golf courses, do they just have like their own in-house landscaping people?
I would assume many of them do
sense,
just because of how big they are, but I'm sure some.
That was my son's summer job the past 2
I
summers.
don't know.
He
Oh.
worked at a golf course on landscaping and maintenance.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I mean, it
We
makes
work
sense because it's
for the
probably
golf
really
course.
expensive if you
Got it.
try to hire that.
Now I get it.
Yeah, so
So-
that was, oh, go ahead.
No, so just to clarify, so the trustees do not want to allow exemptions. They want the law to cover everybody. And you said they don't want electric to ever be used at any point in the year. Is that what you said?
No, so this isn't this was the landscaping committee, what's the landscaping association. So they want,
Okay,
yeah, so this wasn't the trustees at all.
okay. So
yeah.
landscaping
So the
association.
Landscapers Association, in fact, none of them actually work here in Rye Brook. They're just like here, I think, or maybe they're even nationwide. But they have like a lot of people behind them, so they can kind of show up in numbers a lot of the time, which is what happened last time we proposed this. But they wanted electric blowers to be allowed throughout the year, and they didn't want exemptions for schools, golf courses, churches, where else, graveyards, things along those lines that we had written in as exemptions. They didn't want that because they said it was unfair, that it was targeting landscapers. And I said, no, this is for residents and landscapers. It's just, obviously who uses gas blowers the most? Landscapers. So I mean, in that sense, they are affected more than maybe other people are. But and they also pointed out like the village, they wanted it to be so the village wasn't allowed to use it if they weren't. So again, that's something like Greg had said, that's going to be a point of contention where we probably aren't going to agree with them on all of that, because there likely are going to be some exemptions. Maybe we can look at reducing them. Sorry, I don't know, but we can think about that.
So what, you met with a landscaper group, right?
Yeah, we did a little Zoom call, and it was who was it? Was it the head of the landscaping association or
Presidents, like vice president. So basically the members of their board that they have.
You don't know if their suggestions are acceptable or potentially unacceptable to the trustees?
Well, that's
No.
what we're discussing it. Yeah. So basically we're discussing it here with you guys first as members of Sustainability Committee. And then again, we have our one trustee on right now too. So that's where we could start. And then we had Deputy Mayor Heiser on that call with us. And again, he is pretty much open to what the committee, which me and you guys recommend to him. But we at least want to hear from you guys first, Sustainability Committee, what you guys are comfortable with, and then we'll definitely report to the remaining of the board to see if they will go along with your recommendations.
I'm sorry, just to then throw in quickly my 2 cents, which is to the extent that we sought to make our proposed legislation consistent with surrounding communities, or at least was it, I forget if it was Portchester specifically that we tried to make it consistent with.
I think it was.
Okay, all right. So yeah, I would say then if they have to live with it in Rye, they'll have to live with it in Rye Brook. If we're recommending the same things, but that's just my.
And their
initial.
point, as far as the electric blowers go, what they were saying with that, their argument was that they need to be able to use electric blowers to blow the stuff around pools, I guess, like the debris around pools,
Like in walkways, driveways,
driveways,
Yeah,
and things like that.
I love how when we've suggested electric, they're like, oh no, the battery, it would last, and and then suddenly they're confronted with this and like, oh well, no, but let's use electric.
Yeah, I feel like no matter
Driving.
what we propose, they're gonna find some sort of fault in
this-
it, because
yes.
that's just they don't want it to go through.
Hypocritical.
They would rather have less restrictions on
Of
them,
course.
understandably, so any kind of
Possible.
restriction they don't want, essentially.
And I'll just say this point too, like I did it, guys, they're an association for landscapers. So as Bridget said, I mean, they are lobbying us to make it as easy for them as possible. And as I stated, look, the thing is that these are the main concerns they have with them. And as Bridget said, that I'm sure that they're going to find some fault no matter what proposal we have, but I'm just going to be very blunt. There are certain things, like I said, that maybe we can look at. Maybe revising some of those restrictions on churches or schools, whatever you guys comfortable with, because again, I'm just the neutral person here I'm just the liaison. Or maybe scaling back some restrictions on electric to make their lives a little bit easier there. But again, this is just my personal opinion. I was speaking about this with Bridget as well as with our village administrator, as well as with David Heiser. is that they weren't happy with the exemption with our village staff. Well, in my view, that one has to stay because the reality is we have a skeleton crew. And and I told them very clearly that their work portfolio is a lot larger than these landscapers have. I mean, they do a variety of different tasks and they need to move on from one job to the next in a very quick, orderly fashion. However, to speak about this with Chris is that we don't need to have a local law to necessarily say that we will phase out our use of gas leaf blowers. I mean, that's something that we would like to do anyway. And Chris and I have talked about finding ways, even putting aside the legislation that we've been trying to put together here, is that just finding ways that our DPW staff can use them less and less. Now, look, it is an expensive endeavor at the moment, but again, it is the way of the future in terms of, and our staff understand that. So, and we've explained that to them too. It's just that it's not a matter of if, it is just a matter of when. And I do understand that, well, some people may say, well, how come you guys can do it, but we can't? But it's just being as honest as I can, it's just the reality of the situation. They have 11, they're at full capacity, which in some cases not, they have 11 staff members. And they're not all going to be on leaf blowers. They're divided up into different crews for different tasks. So they just don't have the manpower just to use gas for all of our parks and the other functions they need to use them for.
And I would love to know, like, for instance, like what the average property size is in Rye Brook, because it doesn't seem to be that full. Like most people have some property, but it's not huge. Like it's not like they live on a park or anything.
Yeah.
So most of the houses have modest yards. Debbie, go ahead.
I play devil's advocate a little bit. I actually think that they have a point, and I think that there may be a reason why they're doing this. I do think that when we look at legislation to exempt, you know, in some ways you would think that the town, the municipality, the golf courses, that they have the resources more than a small landscaper and a small business does to invest in this and to be able to shift over. And it does feel like the burden, and I know some landscaping companies may be larger, but a lot of them are small businesses. It does feel like we are putting the onus and the burden on them and not necessarily on these large organizations, which may be able to handle it, and businesses, which may be able to actually have the resources to be able to do that. I understand everything that you're saying, Greg, about why it would be difficult for the village of Rye Brook. But those exact arguments are the arguments that the landscapers are bringing as well. So if a Rye Brook can't afford to change over everything, how do we expect the small businesses to be able to do that? That's just one thing. From their point of view, it's very possible that should the legislation be written in such a way that there are no exemptions, the pushback is not just going to be these landscapers and landscaping association, it's going to be the landscapers and the schools and the village and the, right, and everybody, right, the golf courses, everybody is going to be pushing back. And I don't remember where we came out ultimately on the homeowners associations. I know I was not a fan of exempting them. I don't remember what the final recommendation was. So, you know, I just think that it's something that we really do need to be conscious of, because all the reasons that Greg is saying why the village can't implement something like this and why it's so costly and we don't have the resources to do so, these small businesses are probably feeling the same way. And then the other thing is I am hearing the argument about not having any part, if I understood it correctly, that there should not be a ban on all leaf blowers for any portion of the year, but that all year long electric should be. And I personally think that on those months during the year where we don't really need them actively to clean up the leaves, I'm very comfortable with instituting the ban and continuing to recommend that we have a ban during those months that we put it in, you know, that was in the proposal. So on one of their points, I'm kind of like, yeah, I get this and I kind of understand it and almost agree with it. And on the other point, I think most of the other municipalities that we looked at that had bans in place did ban for certain periods of time during the year, also all leaf blowers, and then allowed electric during the times when they were really needed.
Yeah.
Are we even allowed to like tell the schools how when they can blow or not? I don't know if we like have jurisdiction over that.
I mean,
Well,
that's
that's a good
question
point
as
then,
counsel.
so-
I mean, a legal counsel, when we included it the first time, didn't raise like
Mhm.
any flags in terms of it that we
I would
could.
say no, but let's
Probably,
find out.
I
It's
will.
probably driven by state. It's probably, the
yeah.
guidelines for the schools are probably coming from the state,
Exactly.
and the municipality may not have. But I would think golf courses.
Yeah,
And
no,
I
they would be.
do think that the village, you know, the village, like, you may have a lot more property that you need to take care of versus a particular homeowner, but the landscapers may have a whole lot of little properties that add together, right, to the same mass as one of these things that we're planning to exempt.
Are there any active golf courses in Rye Brook currently? I know there was one that shut down. Are there any
don't know.
others?
I
I
think
don't-
Lime Brook is
There's the
part of Lime
Blind
Brook.
Brook Golf Club. Yeah,
Yeah.
Okay.
There's
Is
There
that
is-
the one that's behind Country Ridge?
yes.
Yeah, the one.
Behind
on
Country
Country
Ridge.
Ridge.
At the intersection of Anderson on Anderson Hill,
Yes, that's the same one.
That's the entrance, yeah.
across
Yeah,
from
that's the only
Durham.
one that I could think of too, and that's like the biggest one. And look, the good thing for us in terms of residential properties is that we don't have a lot of huge properties like that in Rye Brook, because it's just not what the village is made of. I mean, yeah, maybe we have a few, but overall, the overall big picture is that there isn't a lot of like mansions. I mean, I don't know many myself, but again, the point is that we don't have a lot of the big properties that they're, at least in terms of residential, that they're concerned of. And just in terms of, I just want to stress this point in terms of our own village staff. I mean, it is resources, but again, also in conversations with our DPW staff, the main like essence for them is just the time factor. Because yeah, I mean, electric will just take a little bit more time in terms of, I mean, that's of course, it's just one of the trade-offs. I mean, the recharge batteries. But again, when I explain to the landscapers too, it's just that, again, not to say that their job is any less time consuming, it's just that, well, our village staff, it's just that they have a lot more tasks that they have to get done within a certain day. And honestly, there are times when they're still.
But I thought, I mean, part of the point of having the ban from March to September or whatever is that there isn't stuff to blow. So like, what is the village, what are the village landscape people blowing if that's our justification for even having the ban?
Well, yeah, they use it for even sometimes like for again, like it's sometimes there'll be snow like on the ground, they use it for that as well. If they have to blow it off again, not typically. That's just
I
one
mean, like
example.
in March.
Yeah, if it's still, if we have still use it for that. There'll be a couple other tasks that they could definitely use it for. So again, it's during these times, again, it's not, is it as pressing? No, but again, it's just for safekeeping in the sense that if they did have to, and they wouldn't be as constricted because of the other tasks that they have at hand. And that's mostly for us, is mostly the time factor because they're on a skeleton crew. But as I stated, and I definitely want to stress this as hard as I can too, it's just that I've also already told them, is that you, at some point or another, you guys, and not like 5 years down the line, and start thinking about this now, particularly the highway superintendent, is that figuring out ways that you can reduce the impact in terms and the amount of time that you're spending using them. Because again, we do want to also we don't want to be, as a village, we don't want to be the last ones basically transitioning in the village itself, because for obvious reasons, I mean, that's just not setting a good example. I mean, as I said, for now, the exemption needs to remain in place just because of the reasons I already mentioned. But again, 5 years from now, I don't even want to see I don't want the village to be the last ones transitioning ourselves. So again, we've already told them that you guys are gonna have to start figuring this out in terms of how you can start reducing the impact already. You know, we don't need the local law to tell us that. Again, if our trustees, the village board can really just give the directive themselves. I mean, Chris and I have already kind of told them already themselves to start trying to figure out ways to do that. And look, and they're supportive of it. Again, it's not like we're getting any resistance from our village staff whatsoever, because we're not. But that's definitely something I told them to, as well as Chris, to look at relatively soon.
And I know from talking with Portchester, I mentioned it before, I think that they've purchased leaf mulching blades, I guess they are. for their riding mowers. So they actually don't collect leaves or debris anymore. They just mulch it all into the ground. And it's actually saved them a ton of time on their crew. Like the crew is very happy because they don't have to pick it up and like move it and do like they said they used to have just a gigantic pile of leaves all the time, that it was like a mountain, you know. And now they don't have to do that. And they told us, they said, you know, the blades were actually really, really cheap. They weren't expensive. And so it was a really cost-effective solution for them. And so I think if we were to be able to provide something like that to the Rye Brook crew, maybe that would be another incentive for them to also follow the legislation. Like, hey, this is actually going to save you time. It's going to put more nutrients into the soil, and it's leading a good example for the community on how to leaf mulch. And one of the other, I guess some of the other things that we would need to refute with them is they were insisting, and here's the thing, it's like I have to find people from other communities where they have bans in place to tell us if their costs went up once the bans took place in their towns, because they're saying, oh, you know, the landscapers they're going to charge more if they can't use a blower. I've heard that that's not the case from several people, that they have not seen price increases. We asked them to provide like some names of landscapers that can tell us the difference. They didn't provide that. So, you know, it's all anecdotal. So I want to get some testimonies from people in other communities to say like, no, our prices have not gone up. Because I think that would be hopefully.
It's just so silly. Like these landscapers in Rye Brook work in these communities and they know if they've raised their prices or not. So it's just such a like circular, just like shenanigans.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and
I
the
mean,
most
they
of them
want
work
to
in
kind of
Rye Brook.
scare us to be like, oh, you know, it's going to be like people are going to get mad because it's going to go up this much.
Yeah,
But we have to think, like, we know from our list that we have, we're one of the last communities to implement this.
exactly.
So are they charging us less then? Is that
Exactly.
or are we at the same level? Because I'm pretty sure they're charging everybody here the
That's
same
what I
price
would say
they
to them.
charge
Well,
the
what are
other
you
people.
charging people in the other communities with the bans? Why don't you give
Well,
us the data?
And it could be that they're not actually charging more because competitively they can't charge more, right? But they have a lower margin and they're earning less money because if their costs are going up or it's taking them more time, you know, I'm hearing a lot about time, right? If it's taking them more time to do the same work, then the cost goes up from either a resource or labor point of view, or, you know, the equipment point of view. So it's possible that they have, you know, lower margins. But yes, if it's surrounding us and every other community has it, I wouldn't put too much stock in that particular argument in terms of them raising the prices.
I mean, these guys, like, I'm gonna like throw a monkey wrench into this thing and just say my piece about it. But like this past, you know, our ban is from March through September. Like usually in prior years, I feel like once Thanksgiving passed, you know, I stopped hearing the leaf blowers. I heard them like up until at least Christmas Eve. And I still have this past week I was at West Med, 3030 Purchase Street. And I know that's not Rye Brook, but like Capacci Brothers was there, like literally blowing, like there's a little brook where the parking lot is, and they were like blowing like the brook. Why are they blowing? And so I feel like what the landscapers do is they just extend their season, and there's like not even a leaf on the ground, and they're just like walking around blowing. And so I'm just like, I think the ban should be from December 5 through September. Like these guys are just making money by continuing to show up, and like, you know, people either aren't home or they don't say anything, or it's a business who, you know, is not like, no one's really paying attention, whoever's hiring these guys, and they're just coming and they're blowing air. They're not actually, so even the whole argument about, well, it takes us more time to do the work. Well, there's actually not even any leaf on the ground. You're just walking around with a blower and you're not really doing work. Anyway, so that's partly my just personal beef, that I just feel like they've extended their season to continue to make more money, number one. And number two, I just have no belief in their argument that it takes them more time to do the work, because I don't think they're actually doing anything. I think they're walking around with blowers just blowing nothing. And I would like to, and I would want to extend the duration of this ban from like December through September, which I mean, I don't think we can do it this like 11th hour, but I'm just saying it. That's what I would want to do.
Yeah.
I'll just say one thing too. Again, the legislation we get through, guys, again, this is meant just to also be like a starting point. Again, we are with the last meeting.
Yeah, no, I know. I know. Glad to start
But
somewhere.
it's also, yeah, but again, but it doesn't mean that actually the points you brought up are wrong or invalid. I mean, because
Yeah.
you could make several of those arguments too, but and rightfully so. But again, this is just my personal hope is that whether it not be any of us on this call involved, but if in a few years from now, like another sustainability committee, if and none of you are on it at that point, or if I'm not with the village anymore, different board of trustees wants to revisit this, again, we're giving them a good foundation to start from. And again, this is, I think,
Absolutely.
what we have, I think, is a good starting point. Again, just to really just kind of break the ice, so to say, with having any sort of restrictions. And we can build off that. I think that right now the main things that we just want to kind of figure out, hopefully by the end of the night, is that whatever, sorry, the exemptions that they were, or the issues that they were asking for in particular, the ones that couple that Bridget mentioned, if that's something that you guys are comfortable with looking at, either some of it or all of it or none of it. And again, that's your guys' decision to make.
Yeah, so do we want to concede on any of the points? I mean, so they want the electric blowers throughout the year and they want no exemptions to be present. Like Greg said, that's probably not going to happen on the exemptions part, but do we want to give anywhere with this? Do we want to think about allowing electric blowers throughout the year?
Something that we had discussed before that I think could apply to the exemptions is to have a phased-in approach. So that the actual legislation isn't just, okay, we're going to start, because, I think what I'm hearing from Greg is we're just going to start with something. It's not all the way where we want to go, but we're going to start with something. Often when legislation passes, the legislators don't go back 6 months later or the following year and reenact new legislation on the same exact topic. So perhaps this could have phased in approach that holds the village accountable several years from now, or 3 years from now, whatever it is, or these exemptions go away over a period of time if we think that that's a valuable thing to do. So day one, it's going to apply to these people, and phase two, it's going to apply to that at a certain level, period of time, and phase three to that. I think that could be a way to handle the exemption portion. As far as the time period ban, again, from what I remember, most of the other municipalities had that included already. So I really don't see a reason to compromise on that.
That's a good idea. And I like that idea too of doing phased in. I think it makes a lot of sense. Michael, I see that you have your hand raised.
Yeah, I would, my initial reaction is let's leave it like we wrote it. If they have the ear of the board, or if the board comes back for reconsideration, we can reconsider at that point. But I would leave everything as we drafted it, and I would leave the recommendations as we drafted them, and I would stand by them at this point.
Okay. I guess who was present for the last time we did this? I know Ashley, Michael, you were there, right? Frank, were you at the last one?
Yeah.
So we know they had a big showing of landscapers that showed up, and there weren't very many residents. I think that was one of our biggest issues, is sometimes it's, who talks the loudest in the room. And so we need to make sure that we're getting people in the room that are going to be supportive of this, not just us there. I would also like to get people from other towns that have implemented this to give their own testimony of like how it's been successful for them. And I hope we can get more community members to attend this time and kind of gather people a little bit more, because last time I think that was one of our big issues, is we just didn't have the people show up at the actual meeting. People messaged us later and we're like, oh, why isn't this? But we have to get them to actually come to the meeting and to hopefully speak, because we can keep saying our suggestions, but it means a lot more if it comes from other community members also. So, and a lot of times, like last time the landscapers came, none of them were actually landscapers within the community. They just have a lot of members of their group and they're willing to actually show up. And so they can fill the room with people that are going to disagree with us, you know, and it makes it a little bit hard to, you know, suggest things like this when you have a whole room of people that are, you know, very against it. So.
Now, are you talking about the Board of Trustees meeting where they're going to be discussing this or
Yes,
voting?
that would be at the time when we have, once we give a final, a proposed local law to the board, then again, we have to have a public hearing, and that's when we would have,
Okay, so
anybody.
we're talking about the public hearing.
Yeah. 'Cause
Okay.
the
I
public
just wanted to
hearing-
clarify when you're saying
Yeah.
meeting. So you're talking
Public
about
hearing, yeah.
once the legislation is where it needs to be at the public hearing. And
Mhm.
absolutely, if, you know, it's helpful to have the advocates come.
And I
Yeah.
know
The
Greg has
public
come-
hearing is for it. If the public,
Yeah,
if all
the
of the,
public, yeah.
you're hearing from the public is one-sided, it's very hard to, you know, go against what everybody is saying and legislate something else.
Yes, I just want to also stress this, as much as I can, and Trustee Fisher will, also say I'm 100% correct on this, is that, and most times when we have public hearings, we're lucky if one person shows up. And so, usually it's nobody. So, and the reason why I really want to harp on this is because, as Bridget said, they can fill a room. And look, I'm not trying to create this as a war between us, because again, we've had some good conversation with them, and I've had my communication with them since we started this process. So that way we can try to avoid some of the issues we ran into the last time we attempted this process. But look, at the end of the day, there's going to be some things they're not going to be happy with, I'm sure. But I just to be honest, I mean, they're just going to kind of have to live with it. And but it's critical that, again, as many of you guys show up, and as well as you promoted to your neighbors or anybody know that who can show up. Because again, we often, I'm sure you guys get this all the time. I know we sometimes get calls to those, oh, I support this, but then no one shows up for the public hearing. And then it kind of leaves those who do, like Bridget and you guys as well on the call, to a bit of an awkward spot, as well as the board an awkward spot, and it leaves Chris and I in a bit of an awkward spot when we have all these landscapers, and most of them, or many of them may not even do any sort of work in Rye Brook, but they're giving every reason why the local law shouldn't be passed. So again, it is crucial. Again, we can promote it as much as we can on our ends. Again, I can put it on the village social media pages. Chris can put it on this newsletter. We got our trustees can help promote it through their networks as well, particularly Trustee Epstein, who seems to know everybody in the village. And that's not exaggeration, by the way. But at the end of the day, again, obviously, we can't like forcibly drag residents to come in, but it is important that we fill as many people as we can to try to say why they support it for whatever reason that is.
I think that becomes a public outreach, you know, outreach effort that the committee can actually do. You know, it's not public, personal. You know, I think really what it takes is somebody making a phone call or texting, you know, somebody who know that's a proponent of this and saying, hey, there's a public hearing. It's really, you know, we think this is a great thing for our community. Are you willing to show up and to speak? Because there are people that are going to shoot down the idea otherwise, and, you know, reach out to people who are proponents.
Yeah.
But I think that's something that the committee that we can work on, I think, as a group in terms of getting people to show up.
You know, even if you guys, again, if each of you on this committee bring one person, again, that's already, and the way I view it, is success. Again, I will promote it on the village. I have access to all social media pages. Chris has access to the newsletter. Again, that's the way that him and I can promote it on our end. But again, as you guys being the ones who live, or not only serve the committee, but who also live in Rye Brook, and again, to be able to connect with your neighbors, your community members, and to be honest, they're more likely, they'll be probably more likely to listen to you guys as people they know you. And again, they don't. Most of the residents in Rye Brook don't know who I am. So again, if I were to speak to a resident, say, oh, please come to, they may say, yeah, and they may forget about it. It doesn't just necessarily have the same impact if it comes from you guys, as not only the committee members, but also their friends and neighbors.
Yeah.
But I guess we could also ask this question, trustee Fisher, as our liaison, as well as one of the trustees, what say you on everything that you've just heard?
So I mean, I like your idea of phasing it in. I think that's a really good idea. And I really believe that if these other towns are doing it, then these guys are used to it. You know, this isn't like, we're not rewriting, you know, history here, or reinventing the wheel. We're really picking up from what other people did. But maybe starting with like a small band from, what was it, you know, May through
March to September.
right?
I
You
think
know,
September
maybe
1st, if I remember correctly, just because that September is when lease season starts.
Right. So whatever it is, but maybe starting with like the smaller band, and then maybe, you know, year 1 or 2, we allow electric leaf blowers, and then by year 2, it's phased out.
Okay.
And then,
So wait, when you say allow electric, you mean during the ban period?
right, because wasn't that one of their items of
I
contention?
guess, like, one of the things we had discussed at the last meeting, which I thought was really salient, is just that in terms of like being able to enforce it, that it's just really hard because you see a blower, you're like, are they blowing an electric? Are they blowing a gas? And that it just like created a lot of confusion. So that's why we wanted to just ban them and not have this sort of hybrid electric now, but gas then. And it just seemed to be like an enforcement complication, implementation complication.
Right. No, I understand that.
I have to run pick up my son, so I might be
Okay.
back in like 10
I know.
minutes.
Wait, I'm sorry, 1 second.
I'll just
Sorry,
do
my
our-
daughter just got home, sorry.
Okay, I'll be back.
Yeah, that sounds good. But I can also speak to, again, our police department, particularly our police lieutenant, who's kind of running the things right now. Just to see, again, in terms of how difficult it would be for them to get their perspective on it too. If, again, this is just hypothetical right now, but if we were to say, okay, we would allow electric leaf blowers for the first year, or just allowing it just in, at least for now, for legislation in its entirety as a package, as they requested, you know, so that way they can blow like debris off of walkways or pools. Am I missing anything, Bridget, on that, or some other activities of that nature? Just to see what our PD's view on how difficult it would be to enforce it.
Yeah, and I know you said before that you reached out to the HOAs and they didn't
Yeah, and again,
respond at all.
yeah. Only one responded to me, but he just put me in contact with the landscaper who, again, said he was going to some conference. Again, he said, I support it, but again, it's just about getting the technology and the cost out there. But again, I really haven't had any other further communication with that individual. But again, the other HOAs didn't get back to me.
Okay.
Yeah, I guess the only concern I have with the phasing in is if everybody had electric currently, then this would be less of an issue. So I don't want people to go rush out and go buy electric blowers only for a year or two to totally ban it. You know, if you were, you know, going to phase in, it could have been phase in certain months and just keep on expanding that through the year to see what actually is optimal, you know, from the ban. But to like say electric this year, but not next year, people aren't going to understand that. They're going to say, okay, I can go buy an electric blower today. And then next year we say, okay, forget it. You can't even use your electric blower. So I'd rather not do that. Either electric blowers for good, you know, and that's part of, you know, the legislation, or it's just a ban on wall blowers.
Yeah, that makes sense. We don't want to create more waste,
Right.
you know, by doing this.
Right.
So, Debbie, I
And-
think you had something to say.
Yeah, no, I was just gonna say, I think the phased in approach works for some elements of the legislation, but not all. I would caution about again, and I should have reviewed the most recent, you know, proposal that we sent over to the, you know, to make sure that I'm remembering the most recent and not just one of our discussions. But I don't think we want to do something that's so watered down. So if we're not going to ban it at any point in the year, and we're not going to ban the, you know, we're going to have all these exemptions, why bother doing it in the first place? So I think we're getting into a very, you know, I agree with what Ashley said. That's what we had discussed in the past. It gets very confusing. This one's allowed during April, but this one's not allowed during April. Who's going to know which one they're using during April? You know, I really think that we can ban it during the months that we don't need it. And if I remember correctly, our window of months that we were banning them for is very short relative to, again, what some of the municipalities are doing. You know, we really could even extend that. So those are the kinds of things that I would extend, like, okay, we're going to start with whatever it was, 3 or 4 month ban. It's really short, our window, from what I remember. And then we're going to expand that to, you know, maybe, I don't even know that that would be where I would use the phasing in, but I would use phasing in terms of exemptions and those types of things. And I agree with what Frank said, that, you know, we don't want to push everybody to go out and purchase expensive equipment to transition if our real intent is to ban them altogether. And I think that's something we need to be cautious of. And I do feel like whatever legislation gets passed, in my very, very limited experience, legislators are going to do the best job they can on a particular subject, on a particular piece of legislation. And then they are not going to want to go back 6 months or a year later and redo the legislation that they just did to change it, expand it, do anything like that. So I think if we have a longer term view, whatever that longer term is, 3 years, 5 years, 1 year, that should get into this legislation. And then it's in place for a period of time. You shouldn't expect to be writing something that's going to need to be changed 2 years from now. I just, expectation wise, like, I just don't think, you know, that makes sense. And I think we do have to be careful, you know, we don't want to, you know, have everybody transition over and then tell them, you know, then expect to create new legislation then that says, sorry, you can't use it at all.
Yeah,
I think it seems more realistic too, if we give kind of phased in approaches to certain aspects of it, you know, I think it'll be more well received by people if we do it that way. One thing I just thought of off the top of my head is, would we want, with the properties that we're giving an exemption to, golf courses, we know we don't like, graveyards, things along those lines, would we want to say you have an exemption, but you can only use electric? Is that a solution? Maybe that they still can't use the gas blowers, but they can use the electric blowers in the time. Like, would we want to propose that? I mean, what's like, is there any thoughts on that? Or do we just want to give them a full exemption? Because I know we talked about maybe eliminating some of the exemptions altogether, but maybe we could allow them to use electric as a compromise or something.
You know, Rye Brook's very small. Do we have a list of what all these exemptions are and who we have? Like, we're just talking about golf courses. I mean, what do we actually have in Rye Brook that qualifies for an exemption? Is the cemetery over on Ridge Street on the corner there, is that still Rye Brook?
Here's what we wrote. Hold on, sorry, it's going slow. Let me go back up. Municipal entities, schools, religious institutions.
I know what we wrote, but do we know how many cemeteries are in Rye Brook? How many churches are in Rye Brook? How many synagogues are in Rye Brook? What are we really talking about, and who are we really talking about? Because we're very theoretical, but Rye Brook is really small. And so, you know, are we talking about one cemetery, and is it worth having a conversation with the people at the cemetery to find out, you know, hey, what are you doing and what are you thinking? And, you know, we're looking at doing this, and a phased in approach or whatever, and getting input before we, you know, the legislators just go ahead and do this. Anyway, I just don't know. I mean, we have 2 schools, right? Is there another school? There's no other schools in Rye Brook. We have 2 properties that are defunct right now and under consideration for further development. We don't know what they are going to be. I believe we have 1 cemetery. We said we have partial 1 golf cart, you know, part of a golf course, 1 golf course.
Anderson Hill Road, I forget the name of it, but that one is huge. It's right next to Enclave.
Right, but I don't know that it's all, I don't know that the entire golf course sits in Rye Brook. I think the part behind Country Ridge, right on the border there, does. I haven't looked at the map.
But honestly, I think they may already be using like electric.
So
I'm not entirely sure. Again, I'll have to check it, because Chris tell me something of that nature, that they got, again, this is the years past, they got complaints about
right.
the way, so they decide, oh, we'll just transition
Okay.
over.
And I think we have the
the
just three homeowners associations, I believe. You know, when we were talking about that, right? We have the Arbors and we have Belfair and we have Talcott has a homeowners association. I think.
Doral, Enclave, Kingfield, so there's at least that I can.
Okay, Kingfield now. All right,
I reached out to at least 5 of them that I can
right,
find.
and they didn't respond.
Yes.
Yeah, there's no homeowners exception now, exemption.
Right, right.
In the current.
I was just like, you know, businesses, I don't remember what we did, business properties. Did we talk about corporate?
No, we do exempt membership clubs. I don't know what that was just something that Rye had put in. Retirement communities.
Right, we have Atria
Yeah, we have several of those.
and King Street.
Took the same, or we
Business
took the
Greenwich.
same exemptions Rye did.
I'm sorry.
What's that?
We took the same exemptions from the Rye legislation.
Exactly. Yeah,
It was-
exactly. We took
the
the
same ones.
Because
Okay.
that's the part of the thing is we don't want it to be confusing, right? So
Yeah.
we're assuming that these landscapers, if they operate in Rye Brook, they're probably also operating in Rye. And you know that, so it's like if we keep it more consistent, they're more likely to follow it just because they know the rules already for Rye.
Okay,
And we know that Rye has enforced it to a certain extent. And so they're probably fully aware of, you know, okay, if we do the somewhat similar, they're like, okay, we understand that. But so, I mean, we can kind of change things. I don't know, you know, it might make the landscapers happier.
But think of it this way, everything is about a little bit of
Well, it might
compromise.
make the landscapers association happier, but it might make the landscapers here not as happy. Go ahead,
But-
Greg.
But I say that part of this too, like anytime you do any sort of legislation, whether it be at the local or county or state or the federal level. And again, a little bit of compromise, of course, has to be in place. So again, I'm the liaison on the building manager assistant. So again, I go with what you guys want to do. Of course, I advise as much. I give my input when it's necessary and I stay out of it when it's necessary. But again, a little bit of compromise with them. Again, it's not necessarily a bad thing either, just in terms of, okay, where can we meet you in terms of and look, I'm not saying Rye is nothing wrong copying Rye though too, but also we don't have to go, you know, like word for word everything that our neighboring community does. I mean, again, because there's certain things that may apply Rye that won't apply Rye Brook and vice versa. Like again, there's certain like like corporate, like somebody mentioned that we don't have a lot of corporate spaces in Rye Brook. I mean, corporate would mostly be an issue when into Portchester because Portchester has all these retail stores. I mean, we really don't have really any big retail stores in Rye Brook that at least I can think of. I mean, the only really thing we have is just Rye Ridge Shopping Center, that area over there in terms of like storefronts. But again, I mean, but if there's any places that you think that it's possible that we can meet them halfway, again, this is where I will give my personal input. I would say that, you know, that it's something that you can look at in a positive way. Okay, that's something that, you know, that if it'll ease that concern, okay, fine. Again, if there's certain things that you guys are dead set, you know what, this is what we want, then that's okay too. Because again, I explained, and I mean, Dave told me, oh, we want to be fair, you know, we want to be compromised. I mean, at first, they were saying, oh, we could be set up for a discrimination lawsuit, which again, not anywhere near going to happen because it's saying, oh, you're discriminating against landscapers, which I'm no lawyer, but landscapers is not a protected class in terms of discriminating. I could say that I don't like people with glasses, but you still can't sue me for that. But again, even our council said, again, it's not going to happen, even if they tried. But that's beside the point. But anyway, as I just wrapping up what I was saying, is that there are certain things that, again, that if they don't really like try to find the right words here. If it doesn't really, again, if it doesn't really like mess with or kind of deviate from the main essence of what we're like the bill here, like in terms of if they really, let's say if we want to, let's say, okay, you can use like electric leaf blowers for you know, the blow away like debris from pools or driveways. Okay, if that's something you guys want to grant, okay, that's something you can. But other things that you guys may not be resistant to change, and that's totally okay. And that's just
Another thing to consider is what is the goal of this, legislation?
That is
Is
true.
it to reduce noise? Is it to reduce pollution? Is all that, because obviously if we allow electric, that's still emitting noise that might bother people potentially who we're pushing to have less leaf blower usage. So, I mean, I guess we have to figure out like, do we want to be more serious about one aspect of this than the other? Are we doing it more for noise pollution, or is it more for like air quality, those sorts of things? So Ashley, I think, did you want to say something, Ashley? Or did I just think that you?
No, I mean, I guess I was gone 10 minutes and we're still luckily on the same topic.
Topic. Yeah, this
mean,
is pretty much the only topic of the night. So, you can.
I mean, I was sold on the idea of not allowing electric in the March to September time period when, it was someone else who had brought up the enforcement and the whatever. So that I bought into. And so to me, I mean, like, why are we doing this? I mean, there's just, I think as the sustainability committee, we have we care about all the reasons. We care about the fact that, when you're blowing, the leaves, you're blowing the habitats for a lot of pollinators and critters and the sound pollution and the air pollution. Like, we care about all of it. But in terms of, getting public buy-in and getting it passed, we have to consider, well, what do those people care about? And the spin is how you get them to buy into it, right? So, I mean, my other reason for, aside from the, potential confusion and extra complication of, well, electric's allowed now, but then gas is allowed then, and is the fact that if the landscapers are, and whomever, homeowners are starting to blow stuff in March, then they are, blowing all those leaves that still have, pollinator eggs and are still housing, habitats for critters that, are not emerging until later in the spring. So like, I also don't want them to start, I don't want the blowing to start in March, even if it's electric, because that's one of like my goals. And I think the sustainability committee someone who's on the sustainability committee should care about that, even though that might not necessarily be the biggest priority of the public. So I'm against anything from March to September.
Michael?
Yeah, I mean, in terms of process, would it make sense? I don't know if we're going to get this done tonight in terms of agreement, but pardon me, circulate our proposal, give us a couple of days to just kind of get back with comments on what, if anything, we'd want to change based on what the issues the landscapers raised and our follow-up discussion tonight. Greg, is there a deadline that the board needs to hear from us on this?
We don't, and that's why I think, Michael, that's actually an excellent idea. Again, swords, because I don't want any of you guys to feel rushed in any way. But it all depends on really on you guys in terms of, I mean, in the proposed bill, it takes place from proposed local law. It would be in effect from, if I remember correctly, from March to September. So again, if you guys want to take effect this year, then likely at the next committee meeting, this would have to be a resolved issue. And yes, you don't have to finish it tonight, but now if you guys are saying, okay, well, we can get it in for 2024, then you guys have all of pretty much the entire calendar year. So it really is honestly the best answer I can give. It's really depending on how quickly do you guys as a committee want to see this done. I mean, I know that we've been talking about this at least since pretty much I've been with you guys for a year. I know you guys have been talking about this for a few years before I came on with the village. So I'm sure in some ways that you guys are probably sick and tired of talking about it, which I don't blame you guys, because this has been a long process. But again, but for me, again, I don't want you guys to feel rushed. And at the end of the day, I really just want to make sure that we're crossing all of our T's, dotting all of our I's, and doing this the right way. So that way, again, we don't have to ideally revisit this at least any time in the near future. And yeah, and what I meant before is that like that maybe a few years down the line, a different board and a different committee can reopen it way down the line. But for us, and it's because I'm sure you guys just want to get this ready so that way in the immediate future, you don't have to talk about this again. But yeah, you can definitely circulate any follow-up discussion, any of you want to have, or any, I know we only have half you guys on this call tonight. So if any of them, any that want to give any of their input based on ideas that we discussed here, that's totally okay.
Perfect.
I definitely want it done for this year because like you said, we've been talking about it forever. And so we just need to like put the stake in the ground and get it started. I don't want to wait till 2024.
Yeah, and then that's, yeah, then it would have to be done by our February,
Mhm.
I mean, without my.
Yeah, you're right. It's almost March.
Right, well, you-
Our next scheduled meeting, just because we meet every first Thursday, it would be February 2nd.
And on
So-
February 2nd, they would need to do a resolution or something, or do whatever they need to do here.
Yes, so our next.
For the public hearing.
Yes.
and give
because-
notice
so
for the
I'll
public
send you guys the
hearing.
one That on the schedule now. So our next BOT meeting is on Tuesday for Board of Trustees. So then the next one after that should be February 7th. So when we have a public hearing, we have to give 10 days notice to the public. So that would mean then the public hearing will be held on the 21st. And when you have a public hearing, the board can choose to, which typically that's what happens, be it most in large part because nobody really shows up to them. At least local level. I mean, that you can maybe say at the county level. I'm curious. I'm personally curious, actually. Maybe talk about that at a different time if anybody shows up to county public hearings. At Rye Brook, like I said, I've only a couple times since I've been here a year have I seen anybody show up to anything. So that will be the 21st. And if they enact the 21st, then it could take effect for that March, ideally. And again, of course, I will clear all that with council so that way we're not creating a legal mess for anyone. But that's the timeline we're looking at right now.
So
I
does
mean,
the,
I'm sorry, my understanding is the board's not required to wait for us. We gave our recommendations. The landscapers asked us to maybe reconsider our recommendations, but the board has them in hand, right? The board
So
can
yes, the
act on
board
this
has-
anytime they want to.
The board has, so we what we did was back in November, Bridget came, we had it on as a discussion item. So basically, exactly as it sounds, just so discussing with the board what the current proposals are. And again, this is if, of course, that if you guys wanted to could make any revisions to what we have now based on the landscapers' concerns, or again, if anybody had any last minute adjustments they wanted to make in terms of, oh, you know, after speaking tonight or in the follow-up conversation that you guys can have amongst yourselves on the email chats over the coming days and weeks, that's also something that could be added, and then I can request our council put all that together. But yes, could they act on it as it is now? Absolutely. But it's really all a matter of if you guys just want to say, okay, okay, we listened to them. Again, we still don't agree with their concerns, but we're going to do it anyway.
so the next board meeting is on the 21st of January,
24, whatever that.
24th of January.
That's too
And-
soon. We're not gonna be able to do it, I don't think.
No,
unless we
and we're
don't-
not. So that's why I said our next meeting is going to be for us is the 2nd. So I wouldn't even think about the 24th as a viable option whatsoever. So our realistic target then would be to have it on the agenda for February 7th. So also, again, so that we, in the next few days,
Are
for
you
those,
saying 2nd or 7th? I just want to clarify before.
the 7th would be our next one after.
But then the board, when the board gets, right, whatever our final recommendation is, and as Michael said, we've already submitted a recommendation. So if we wanted to make any adjustments or changes, we could just send something over in an email, right? That says, okay, we
doesn't
heard some
really-
feedback, we'd like to add this, because the board at the next, whenever they're gonna take it up again, they're gonna have a discussion about it. They're going to agree, they're gonna develop what legislation they want to pass based on our recommendation and whatever other input they have. And then once they've come to that kind of decision of, okay, here's our draft of the legislation, at that point, isn't that when they set the public hearing?
So we set the, yeah, pretty much once we get like a final copy, then they could set the public hearing. Again, it'll have to be 2 weeks from that date. Because again, you have to give the public 10 days notice, that's state law. But for us, in terms of just like the first time, because we're not subject to open meetings law, it doesn't have to be anything formal. Like I said, last time we did this, I literally went around saying, okay, each of you, yay, nay. The email, same thing. For those who can't make it, just say respond yes or no on an email thread. And then again,
Right,
Bridget,
I'm saying, so for us, but the board is gonna take up this legislation. They're gonna have a discussion about it at a board meeting,
so,
no?
well, yes, they will, in the sense that when we've already had a discussion with them, what we have now. Again, we don't have to do another discussion item with it. Again, we can always just fill them in on the.
So the Board of Trustees at a board meeting has already discussed this legislation. It was on the agenda and they discussed it.
Yes,
Yes.
I presented to them
I think the
an overview of what we had suggested. They saw a video about leaf blowers and like the effects and all the things, and they were pretty much all in agreement that they were like, yeah, this is, you know, really
Okay.
detrimental. So it went over very well with them. In fact, they were like, oh my gosh, like we didn't know this. We don't want leaf blowers at all. It's kind of like they wanted to go to like an extreme almost with it. Which I was like, I don't know if we can do that immediately. But I'd love to do that in the future. So yeah, they already know the legislation, or they already know the suggestions. So I think, like you're saying, Debbie, we could just maybe send them an addendum or whatever we want, like a little update on like some of our suggestions, or maybe a phase-in approach if we decide to add anything. It seems like we really don't want to change that much from at least what we're saying, right? Like our own consensus, just in our small group here. So I
Right,
don't
which
know
means that we
need to
shouldn't
go
have to
over it all
delay
again.
it that much further until February. That's my point. Like if we've gone through this, and I'm newer to the committee too, but we've spent an awful lot of time on this already. Put a proposal out there, gotten some feedback from one stakeholder, the landscapers. Now I'm hearing the trustees are all in support of this, or even maybe more stringent legislation. Why don't we just go back again after this discussion and look at the final proposal that was presented to the legislators based on this discussion and conversation, see if there's any other additional changes that we would recommend, come to an agreement, and then just send that out to the legislators in advance of their next meeting, if they have time at their next meeting to get it on the agenda.
The reason why I was saying that, again, not saying it could never happen, but there's just a couple other things that the reason why it would be difficult for that to happen. The first one being is that, look, we have half of us here on the Zoom call, and again, ideally we want mostly everyone on this committee to get their input. So again, just however.
Right, but we could do that via email. I'm not
Yeah,
saying not to get their
it's
input.
all
I'm saying
about,
to do
again,
it via
just
email.
however long people our other committee members respond, in terms of because some of them again may take longer than others. But that's just the first one, which is not, as you said, it's really not the most pressing one. It's just the other one. It's just giving our council enough time to draft any potential changes. Again, that's why, because whatever workload that they have, because again, our law firm is Keen and Bean. And again, while they're always on the money, again, we have a great law firm. Again, I always just try to be cognizant of the fact that, you know, we're not our only client. So again, if there is anything else going on with any of their other municipalities or school districts that they serve, that they may not be able to like get on agenda for today's Thursday by Tuesday. No, I understand that, considering that again, they've always been fantastic with us. So that's
But we
just
may
the
not
other.
even have changes ultimately.
But if it has no changes, then it's not an issue. But then it's all, this is a moot point. Like if any changes are going to be made, again, they maybe not be any major changes, but I just want to make sure that they have time to get it done. And again, it doesn't mean that it's not out of the realms of possibility. But again, it really depends on a couple of things. It depends on how fast. I mean, all of you guys here are very quick, but we have 3 or 4 other active members that, again, depending on how really they respond to the email thread, because again, some may not respond for a couple of days. And again, the law firm doesn't work on weekends, so that's their Saturday and Sunday. And again, I can do add-on resolutions, which I do quite often. So technically I can do it up until Tuesday, the day of, which I have no problem doing. But again, I just want to be fair to them because I just don't think it'd be fair to the attorneys if on Tuesday say, hey guys, here's the changes. We need it ready for the end of the night.
So Greg, my recommendation would be when you send, if you're the one sending out an email to the committee members, as a result of this discussion and just asking for any additional updates, changes, anything else, is to give a, if we can have your comments by such and such a date, that will allow this to get on the agenda for the February 7th, I believe you said, meeting.
Yes, that's
Right.
what I intend to do.
And give everybody that heads up that, if we can have, hopefully, we'll have your comments by such and such a date. And so that you can work back, when do you need the comments so that you can do what you need to do on your end, all the due diligence in the process, so that it can get onto that February 7th meeting.
Yeah.
So,
And again, at that meeting, the trustees would discuss it again, or they've already discussed it and they've decided, okay, we're going to vote on, this is the legislation is now in the form that we want it potentially at that 7th meeting, or they're just.
Yes, at the time.
Okay, and
they'll
then
discuss it.
they would say, okay, this is the legislation that we're supportive of. This is what we want to implement. Now we're going to set the public hearing.
Correct.
And then
And
that
by
will
that
happen
point,
2 weeks
public
later,
trust-
give or take, whatever that within that, or
that
beyond, but
At the
a
time,
minimum of 10 days later. And then at that point in time, after the public hearing, how soon can they, at the next meeting after the public hearing, or would they need more time then to digest all the information, if anything comes through the public hearing, before they would want to make modifications or vote?
So that's actually, and that's how I was waiting. So that's the $1 million question in terms of how soon. So, I'll start with the first part, is that by the first part being that by February 7th, when we give them a final copy again, and I'll circulate it to them even before then, so that way by the time of the meeting, our council again has everything reviewed, and the trustees have all have an opportunity to look at it themselves. So by that point, again, they will discuss if they need to, but by the time the public hearing is set for the meeting of the 21st, again, they've already reviewed it in terms of the trustees, and they're not really going to have any more to discuss on their end. But now the $1 million question comes when we have the public hearing on the forgetting the date, sorry, on the 21st. That all depends on exactly what happens. And that's the part where, for me, it's really difficult to answer, because if we get a room full of landscapers and not a lot of public, then that where it can be just a little bit complicated. And typically, as I said, how it's typically done, because most people virtually never actually of any of the times, nobody shows up. So we have a public hearing, the local law or the matter of public hearing, it's resolved that same night. And I don't see any reason why it can't on that same night it is, but in part, again, and this is going, as I was mentioning earlier before, that's going to depend on how many of you guys can come out and how much of the public we can get out to talk in favor of it.
Understood. So
Is
that's
this
February 21st.
Yes. So on the time we have now, again, just to give council the time that they need to, again, just review everything. If there's no changes that we're making, and in a perfect world, that those who aren't on, and I said that it's not a perfect world because I send out in emails, and sometimes, and I'm not throwing shade at anybody, I'm just giving it to you as reality, just so on the timeline, I send out emails, and sometimes from some of the committee members, I don't hear anything at all. And of course, if we're trying to get a yes or no legislation, that can really, do a number on a timeline. So that's what I do plan on doing after this is over. So again, and I don't see why you guys can't start this immediately, in terms of after this meeting, any follow-up conversation you guys want to have amongst yourselves through an email, to kind of hash out any last minute changes or no changes. And then we can I can get the ball rolling on my end to deal with legal, and as well as deal with the board, because that honestly I could do relatively easily. I mean, it's just the main question is just getting through the logistics of everything.
So just to ask the people on this call, Michael mentioned earlier that he was comfortable just keeping the proposal as is and not making any changes to the proposal that we'd already submitted. for the rest of us on this call, are we comfortable with just going what was already, even after what we heard from the landscapers, or do people want to make changes?
Yeah.
I'm comfortable because I think that the things that we've talked about changing, they're not gonna be happy with that anyways. It's like we might as well just keep it the same, because we're not giving them what they want. It sounds like either way. So why not
think-
just leave it the way it is?
I mean, the only thing I would maybe do is like not have a carve out for the golf course. That's the only thing that I would.
Like I said, I'll double check with Chris. The main golf cart that we have, like on Anderson Road, they may have already transitioned anyway. So that also, that may be a moot point, but I'll double check with Chris on that.
I just also wanted to, February 21st is like, that's when you said the
President's
meeting
Day.
is, right?
Yeah, if I have my schedule from February, so it should be the 7th.
It's such a bummer because that's like the February break when
But I thought,
schools are closed. So it's just like fewer people are going to be around to come, at least of the people I know, because I just only know people with like school age kids, and like everyone's going to be gone.
Yeah, but again, it's
I'm-
it's the bottom of up to the board what they want to do. But again, we'll do the best we can.
Yeah, we will. Mhm.
Yes, Greg, I'm sorry, just a
Yeah,
question.
okay.
If we had no changes, could this be on, next week's
Yeah,
board
if you- yes.
agenda, right?
Yes. If
I just attached
Can we go to the 7th?
Yeah, then yes, then I would be able to say to the board, I would like to set a public hearing or I could request the board, can you guys set a public hearing for the 7th?
And just to be clear, I am not going to be here in Rye Brook on the 7th. So I don't know if we change it to that, I just won't be able to present it again. So somebody else would have to do it at that point. Because I'm also not going to have any reception where I'm going.
Yeah.
At all.
I could talk about it again, I could testify, but again.
I can do like a pre-recorded thing,
Yeah,
or
I can't do it. It's again, I would, but again, it has to come from one of you guys. I mean, I will definitely be up on the podium. If given the opportunity, because I'm sure I'll be called to say something at some point, which I'll gladly do. But again, I can't do like what Bridget will typically do and be presenting the outline.
So wait, so the next meeting is the 24th.
Yes, that the next Tuesday. So we have it. We work on a bi-monthly schedule, so every other Tuesday.
I mean, I could come. It's also like at the school district is having like the ribbon cutting for the like opening of the new facility, and they're giving tours. I mean, it's just another big shindig night where like lots of people are probably people like elementary school age people, people more than others are going to be there. I mean, I don't think it's as dire as a conflict as the President's Day week break. But it's another hoopla night with a big competing event. That's all.
Well,
But I still would favor the 24th.
I
over
was
the-
going to be there too, yes.
Yeah, and let me throw this out there too, because obviously if most of you guys or if one of you can be there on the 7th, I think kind of defeats the whole purpose of putting on the agenda if you guys can't make it. So I think Debbie, Ashley, or said you can't, Bridget, you can't. So Michael and Frank, would that be something you potentially do on the 7th?
Yeah, I've got a board meeting from a board that I'm on that's on the night of the 24th. So I can't miss that meeting.
Are we talking the 24th or the February 7th?
Well, no, because if we were put it on the agenda for the
No,
24th,
I mean, I can do the 24th. I would do this. I honestly don't. I have like PTSD from working on the facilities project at the school. I don't need to go to that. I would come to the village meeting instead.
so we could prepare something and then you could present it potentially.
Mhm.
So basically the board would discuss it on the 24th and the public hearing would be on the 7th. And that's where we need people to show up, people to speak. That's when I would not be available to come. So somebody would have to come and actually speak on our behalf if we do want to present it that night.
Yeah.
And I'm fine with helping prepare that. I can put together a PowerPoint. I can, help create that for you, but I'm not going to be able to be there. So somebody else, if Ashley wants to, and I think this could be also multiple people like presenting different portions of it or answering different questions. And then, but mostly getting residents probably to show up is the most important part. And it sounds like doing it on the 7th might be a little bit better than doing it on the 21st, which could be when everybody's on vacation. So.
But also keep in mind though too, it's just that, again, the 5 of you, but we have other committee members who, again, I also have to weigh in. And again, if I don't hear from them in time, because again, tonight, it's very unlikely, again, the stranger things have happened, that I'm gonna hear from anybody at 12 o'clock tonight. So that would leave Friday through Monday for them to respond. Again, so if I hear no changes, then of course, throw it on as is. But if anybody, again, if the other committee members do support making some sort of changes, then that would be something that all of you guys have to work out in terms of how you guys are gonna go about that.
Do we need a vote if we haven't changed anything though? Because they've already voted that they approved the
No,
last one,
no,
which is
no.
which is the same thing, right? So they've
Correct,
already
so-
approved that, and that was essentially what we had gone with as being what we wanted to put forward.
But yeah, but I also don't want you guys to feel rushed either.
No, I just think I mean, it's either this and the thing is right now it's fresh on the board's mind, I will say, and they were very supportive as of when I spoke with them. So I don't know if we wait another 2-3 months, it's like we're gonna have to go over everything all over again, and explain everything, because I mean, they go over so much stuff. They're not gonna remember, this video and all, the speech that I gave. So like at this point, like we've dragged it out for so long. If we can do it sooner than later, then that's great.
I don't mean
Especially if
to
they're all in
rush.
support, but
I'm just talking about in the sense we're doing it between the February 7th or the 21st. That's what I mean. Yeah, because I want this. If you want this to come into effect this year, then I too also would like to get this done next month. But again, I just don't want you guys to feel rushed in terms of we have to get it on next Tuesday.
yeah. But I think if we don't have anything to change, then it's kind of like, why not, I guess, since we couldn't do it. We could do it on the 21st, but it seems like that's not optimal. So,
And the meeting after after February 21st, the following meeting would be March 7th.
Yeah. But yeah, I mean, my only thing is that if the legislation is supposed to take effect in March, I mean, I'll be honest, I don't remember the exact date unless it's like March 1st or like March 15th, but I just don't think it would begin. That's really a good use of the whole law if we're doing it in March or April. Oh, by the way, it's taking effect effective like the second it's passed.
I'm not sure that it matters if you give them 2 weeks notice or if you give them, I think perhaps that's something that needs to be considered, that year one, it's going to start in April or a month after, 2 months after the legislation was enacted.
It's also about
I think that's something that they should take into account. So
it's not about just the landscape itself. It's also about doing outreach to the public as well. So as we talked about.
No, I understand. So that's what I'm saying. From my point of view, if we were going to have this on February 7th or February 21st, which potentially like the January, February, may not be the best dates anyway, right now. If we want the time to reach out to people, to get advocates to show up for a public hearing,
yeah,
right? And we want to get it. I'm just saying that, we want the time to do that. And regardless, I think that when they enact the legislation, because it doesn't matter whether we do it in February and they pass it the 3rd week in February on the 21st, or they pass it on March 7th. At that point in time, year one, I think reasonably speaking, you still have to give some notice. You can't just say, oh, by the way, tomorrow,
yeah,
this new law is in effect. So I think for year one, they're still going, because of the timing where we are right now, it feels like year one, there's still going to have to be, okay, but this year, we're not going to enforce it for the first month or the first 2 months or whatever that time period is.
Yeah, and there's
You're too
your
close. It doesn't matter whether you're giving them 3 weeks notice. I mean, 3 weeks isn't really enough notice either. That's what I'm saying. So we're already in that time period where we should do this on the dates that make most sense, where people can be there and recognize that they'll probably have to have the legislation take effect X period of time after it's passed, so that there's time for the education process to kick in.
But, and I think the question I want to ask you, and I have one thing in mind, but I want to hear from you guys. When we do pass that, and that's all fair enough, Debbie, so what would you guys feel is sufficient enough time from the night of the public hearing and the board approves it till when it'll take effect?
I think we put in the, I mean,
Well,
I don't
for
know.
year-
like-
just for this year, because of where we are in terms of time wise, not like going forward, like.
I think it maybe depends on when we actually get this to, like, let's say, I mean, February 7th is in 22 days from now. Let's say that happens for what, that's what ends up happening. We have in the legislation that it would start in May. So instead we could do it, maybe have it start in August or something, to give like people, to not do the spring, but to start in the summer instead.
Yeah, I think it depends on when the legislation gets passed, so if you got to give them a couple of months to May, but if, say, the board doesn't take it up or it gets delayed, now you're talking August, then it goes into effect the following year, because you can't go on a month and then close it the next month, saying, okay, I have 1 month and then I have to turn it off or something.
Right. No, I think it really, generally should be like the legislation is written that it takes effect in 3 months, or it takes effect in 6 months, or it's, it will be enacted in such and such a period of time. And yes, that makes sense that depending on when it actually gets passed, that we take into consideration what month it's going to be, so that it's not 2 weeks and then all of a sudden,
Yeah, so in no situation is it going to happen where it'll immediately take place. We're going to give it a buffer because we have to do our educational campaign. We wanted to
Right.
send out, some sort of stuff. We have to put all that together. So I think no matter what, it would be fine. We wouldn't.
So,
want
and
it.
my only reason for asking that was because the people in this room seem to already have, these next few weeks, potential conflicts. Whether it should just wait till that next, the follow-up meeting, after President's Week. I'm not pushing that necessarily. I was just asking.
Oh, maybe
'Cause it's not going to take effect in March anyway.
Right.
Maybe what we can do is see how many of the other committee members would be able to make the 7th potentially. And then also gauge residents and gauge some of the people that I was going to contact. We do have 22 days to reach out to people, obviously not tonight. So we're not counting tonight. So we have 20-ish days to reach out to people. So we could, probably gather, who we might need to. I don't know. I mean, what happens are there any like big events happening in March that I don't usually know?
Yeah.
Like the school. So I don't see anything on my calendar, but
And I'm honest, I don't have my work calendar with me.
yeah,
here.
so I don't, it seems like no matter what, there's always stuff happening, of
Right.
course, but I guess the only impetus is like, it'd be nice to get it over with, as far as like not having to have it continue to eat up all of our time, because obviously it does take up a lot of our time and we can't focus on other things while we're doing this. So, that's the positive if we get it done sooner than later, of course.
So what I'm hearing is that if there are no changes and other committee members don't get back to Greg with any changes, we are hoping that it will go on the meeting for next week, the 24th, for the board to set the public hearing, which would be at the following meeting on February 7th.
Mhm.
And somebody needs to present on February 7th because Bridget isn't there and I don't feel qualified, honestly, to present on this yet.
And
'cause I have
Ashley,
to be
you
doing
said
this
you
this
would
month.
be okay with doing that. Are you comfortable with presenting if you need to? Or, I mean, they already know, it's not so much like presenting the entire thing, but just
Mhm.
they're seeing like
So-
the spokesperson for the.
So you're available, you were available on the 7th,
The 7th.
Ashley? Potentially?
Yeah, I can probably do the 7th. It makes me a little nervous just because I have chemo the day before. But I'm on a new treatment. I had chemo yesterday and I'm still here at least to this meeting. So
You're actually looking great.
thank you.
Yeah, you'll have to make it in. Oh, go ahead.
So I think I could. I would just want to make sure at least someone was like gonna be there as a backup just in case I wasn't totally up for it.
So my original thought was actually not to just have me present it, but to break it up into maybe like 3 parts
Mhm.
and have, multiple committee members come up to like address the different aspects of it. I think
Mhm.
it'd be a little bit more effective than just like
Yeah.
one really long thing.
Mhm.
So that was my initial thought anyways, was to try to do it that way. So maybe we could do it that way on the 7th as well.
Okay.
And just kind of address those like key points that I know landscapers, if they show up, are going to try to make, just to refute those
Yeah.
ahead of time and have that all ready.
And
So-
that was the preference versus doing it on the 7th and then the 21st, just from the people here in the room.
Wait, how many of you guys are actually gonna show up as well? And Bridget, you can't make it, but from Frank, Michael, you have your hand up, so.
No, I mean, you're saying tentatively the 7th.
Well, yes, that's if everything works out picture perfect, which, just being humanly realistic, it virtually almost never does, but if we're able to get this on the 24th, then the public hearing will be on the 7th. But again, but realistically, I just need to know this also on my end, is that I need to know 2 things here. How many of you are gonna be able to show up and how many of you are gonna be able to speak? Because again, it shouldn't also fall just on one person. I'm talking. I said it should also come from a couple of you, or maybe even a few of you.
And we're talking about 2 meetings because
Yeah.
one is the meeting where somebody's presenting or multiple people are presenting. And then the public hearing is set. And then the next meeting is the public hearing where we also want a presence.
Yeah,
So we're talking about having a show up at 2 meetings, not 1.
yes, I mean, correct. And again, they've already had it. They already really know.
Right.
It won't be that much of a presence, but where we do need the big turnout from you guys is really at the public hearing itself.
Right.
To really talk about like the legislation to the public. Again, when we set the public hearing, you guys really actually don't really have to be there. Because what we would do in the 20 when we set the public hearing, we're just basically putting a resolution on the board, basically authorizing us to have one. So it really is
Right.
nothing special there going on. It's when we have the public hearings, when we need different speakers to come and explain it. If we especially have room for landscapers in the public that will be coming there. I mean, the board again is already going to be really in the loop, so we're not really going to explain anything new to the board. But also really guys, just to give that board the reassurance that they'll have our community members there to really explain it to members of the public who may be there, and this is the first time they're hearing about the legislation.
So if we're not making any changes, potentially, do we need to do another does somebody need to do
No.
another presentation to the board?
I don't think, yeah, so the 24th, essentially, we wouldn't, if we didn't make any changes, we could just, because they've already had the presentation on that exact thing. It would be redundant. I mean, it's the same people, the same presentation, so.
So I'm sorry, I'm confused on the timing. So what happens on the 24th then, Greg?
So the board will pass a resolution authorizing them to have a public hearing on the 7th. So again, in order to have a public hearing, the board has to set one. So again, a resolution gets passed and they say, basically, we want to have a public hearing on whatever topic or on this local law.
Right, so they can say, let's have it on the 7th, let's have it on the 21st, let's
That
give
was
it
my
a month.
next.
So we really don't know yet when the public hearing is gonna
Yeah,
happen.
I mean, they can set it whenever, but typically how it's always done is that because the only thing is that you just have to give the public at least 10 days notice because that's state law. That's not even, it goes even beyond village code. So at the bare minimum, it would have to be the 7th, but the public hearing, once the board agrees to set one, they can give whatever date they want. So just to give you an idea, we're talking about stormwater. We have tabled the public hearing 4 times now on stormwater. So
Okay.
even if we open it, so whether that's when we set it, like a public hearing, we don't, and let's say, for example, on the 7th, we're not able to get a resolution, the board can say, okay, we're tabling it and we'll discuss it at a later time. I mean, obviously, again, we don't obviously want to do that, so that way we don't have to keep talking about it. But yeah, so it doesn't have to be like 2 weeks from that exact date. It can be whenever, and just to answer your question.
So why don't we poll everybody, including the folks that aren't here, and say, if this goes to the board on Tuesday and they call for a public hearing on the 7th, who could make it? Why don't we start from
Yes,
there?
and that's what I intend to do. That's how I want to start with you guys, is that I know Bridget said you can't make it, and Ashley, it of course depends on the access to the treatment.
Why don't we provide the committee members, if, I don't know, did they ever set it, they could potentially set it for not on the 7th, they could set a public hearing on the 24th of January next week for the 7th or the 21st, correct?
Correct, yes.
So why don't we pull our committee
That's a good
in
idea.
terms of which date is better for you to show up at the meeting for the public hearing, and for you to get other people that you know to show up at the public hearing. Do you think of the 7th or the 21st? To kind of
And then we
give
can,
people those 2 dates, and if we have that information prior to next week, then they can set the public hearing. They don't have to set it for the next meeting. They can set it for the 21st if we're going to have more people who are able to attend on the 21st versus the 7th. They can still set it next week.
Yes, and we can still do that.
And then hopefully not turn it into something where it gets tabled 4 times and it doesn't happen.
Yeah, I mean,
I don't
an
think that's
extreme
where we
case.
want to go.
That virtually happened. This is the only time it's happened. That's an extreme case where we're tabling it 4 times, and that's a case where honestly I'm sick of talking about stormwater. But again, and that's only if the other committee members don't want to make any revisions, or even the board, because the board can also say, again, they're very
Sure.
supportive as it is, but if one of the board members say, oh, is there potential you can look at this, then just to being honest with you guys, they can say, okay, then we'll just have to take a look at that. But I will communicate with the board once I hear from mostly everybody. I don't need to hear from all 10 of you, but if I hear from like we have 5 members here, if I hear from like Sheila, or if I hear from things that are a couple other members, then that's good enough for me, because we have a couple members who are on paper, but they very rarely showed up, and that's what I want to talk about just briefly after this, because I know it's 9 o'clock and I'm sure all of us are getting tired. So that's what we're looking at now. And just there's one more thing I want to ask you guys about this, and then I'll send a follow-up email so we can just move on to one other topic. Because I think for our, I don't know about you guys, but I think I'm kind of leaf blowered out for the night. But I do want to ask this in all sincerity, is that in addition to showing up, at least starting with you guys here, other than Bridget and Ashley, who else is really comfortable talking about it? Because again, to be fair, to me, I'm just gonna be really honest, it wouldn't be fair just to have like Bridget or Ashley doing all the talking.
Robin, maybe. I'm not volunteering her, but she's very well versed.
and I think they would like to speak. Yeah.
And she's usually at our meetings. She just couldn't make tonight. So we might reach out to her.
Yeah, as long, again, at least 3, I would say.
Again, we don't need to present.
It's not presenting.
Are you not talking at the public hearing? Speaking of
Yes.
the public hearing?
Yes, I'm talking about the public hearing, to be able to talk about, because you will be talking about, because we have to talk about the local law. Again, the board will be already, or so at that point, what you're telling the board, it shouldn't be a surprise to any of them, and it won't. Because I'm going to make sure that it's not a surprise to any of them, unless they may have some questions about certain details, which is totally understandable for any sort of a local law. But again, by the time it comes to them for the public hearing, there shouldn't be like a look on their face like a deer in the headlights. Like, what are you guys talking about? That's not going to happen.
And is there a time limit at public hearings for per speaker? Is it?
See, that's a good question. Again, only because we don't have a lot of experience with with hearings,
Okay,
with
because
no
people don't
speakers.
really show up.
So I will, just to answer that right now as best I can, Debbie. So when we've had public hearings, we really haven't had limits, but then again, to be honest, we
Nobody's
haven't
there.
had that many speakers. So even when we've had speakers, we've only had maybe like 2 or 3 at a
Okay.
time. So there really hasn't been a need to say you got like 60 seconds. I'm assuming now we have more prerogative, like let's say if we have like 50 people show up. And
Okay.
look, and the landscapers, again, as I say, they're almost certainly going to fill the room. Or at least if not fill the entire room, have a significant contingent of their members show up, even if they don't really largely work in Rye Brook. And look, and that's their right to do so. Again, because again, the public hearings are open to anybody from anywhere in the world. Even if you don't live in Rye Brook, that's just state law.
Can we get it so that residents can at least take the floor first so that the landscapers aren't.
It's usually in order of when people come in and sign up
like, or-
normally.
Yes, it really, and again, I'll be honest, again, because we just don't have a lot of experience dealing with these matters, because we just don't have a lot of public hearings where we have like this, like people waiting, lining up out the door to come speak. We haven't had to like enact like a lot of these things, and which all makes sense. Like you have like a sign-in sheet and then you do it that way, or give a time limit. I mean, I've done 2 other things like in school districts or whatever, where I've had to do that. But again, we just don't have that kind of turnout in Rye Brook. So this to me, again, I've only been here a year. This is just all new to me, just being totally upfront and transparent with you guys. But I see Michael, you have your hand up, and I will let you speak in just 1 second, or a few seconds. But when we have the public hearing, again, it's I will need at least a few of you to speak to the board to clear up, just any like few questions they may have about the final piece. And as well as to any members of the public who may be there who have questions as well. So that's really what we need like speakers for, is we just kind of explain it to everyone in that room. Okay, Michael, would you want to say something?
Yeah, thanks. And question, which is, I understand why you want, the voice of the committee, et cetera. Why does it actually matter how many landscapers show up? Ultimately, it's a board decision. The board has the facts. They're going to make the decision based on the info they get and in the best interest of Rye Brook. Other than an uncomfortable evening, again, and obviously we want a good presentation from our side, but is it critical at all if the landscapers outnumber the citizens?
And if they outnumber, is it absolutely dire? No. But again, if you have like 25 landscapers and 5 people, members of the public to show up. Again, we ran into that same problem, wasn't there, but just going to the story of Bridget, the board decided to table it. Because, so again, just to make it easier for everyone involved, and again, if you have members of the public to speak out again in favor of it, because then all we're getting is then it's just the concerns of the landscapers, and then we're not really getting the perspective of the residents.
Michael, legislators, right, they're elected and they're representing their constituents and they want to represent and hear from their constituents, but they also need to take into account all the different stakeholders. So if there's a lot of pressure coming from one side or one perspective, because there's often multiple stakeholders, and the other side isn't vocal at all, it just puts the legislators in a much more difficult position to defend the legislation. If they have their constituents there saying, this is why we want it and this is why it's important, and the other stakeholders also supporting that legislation, and they can be within Rye Brook and outside of Rye Brook, it just makes it easier for them to move forward with the legislation that they want to move forward with. They have more grounds to do it, and that's all. It's not initially like they have to. But if this was happening at the county level, they would have stakeholders coming to talk about, asthma and and we may have a doctor in Rye Brook who's, pediatrician who's willing to say, childhood asthma is exacerbated by leaf blowers. And I'm a resident of Rye Brook, and it's really important for me and my community to, see these banned during this time period. So those are the kinds of advocates you would want, residents, and you would want professionals, and you would want people who can support show why it's important to enact the legislation. And it just then makes it easier for them to vote for it. So they don't have to, but it certainly is helpful to have supporters there to say why. And, you know, I know on our Facebook page, you know, when somebody writes something about leaf blowers and you get, you know, a bunch of comments from residents, oh, I hate them, and this, and, you know, from our local municipality, if we can get a few of those people to show up and say in person in a public hearing what they just wrote on Facebook, 2 minutes, 1 minute. You know, I'm a resident, I can't stand it. It makes so much noise. It it disturbs my Saturday. It doesn't matter what their reason is. It's their own personal opinion, but it's somebody coming out to show support for the legislation. And then that makes it much easier for the legislators to take action. That's all. It's very hard to be put in that situation where you're going to take action where the public, anybody at any point in time could come and view this meeting and see that there's a lot of opposition and nobody really is coming out in support.
Yes, thank you, Debbie. And that's pretty much it in a nutshell. Again, it would put them in a really uncomfortable bind if there is a huge disparity in who turns out. And that would make it a lot harder for them. And we want to make it as easy for them as possible.
And that's where I think the committee could be helpful is, you know, not just having us speak, but if we know other people in the community, and again, it could just be, I can't stand the leaf blowers on Saturday. They, you know, the one time that I have in my, you know, to sit outside on my patio and it's annoying. It doesn't have to be a whole technical, you know.
Yeah, again, when people speak, again, they don't have to, I'm not expecting to be like health experts, like, oh, it's like this decimal is affecting my hearing at this percentage point. Again, we don't need that. As Debbie said, it can be something as simple as, you know, it sucks because I want to sit outside, have a cup of coffee and enjoy the nice weather in the spring, and I can't because my neighbor's having 5 leaf blowers blasting. But again, a resident in Rye Brook, again, as residents in Rye Brook, as particularly, and as you guys as committee members, you guys are the best advocates. Again, like I said, I'll be up there as well with you guys the whole time. I mean, if I'm called up to a podium, which I'm sure at some point I will, and I'll probably be the one to, if anything, be happy to kick it off in terms of, I like to introduce, you know, our sustainability members to talk about X, Y, and Z, which in that case will be the points that you guys want to bring up. But again, it's not going to have the same impact if it comes from me. I mean, the board knows me, and again, it's not like they don't trust me because they do. But if we're talking about a local law, then that's when you guys are the best advocates. If it's other resolutions, then oftentimes, to be honest, particularly Chris, who's been doing this longer than I've been alive, because he has so much experience, he's so knowledgeable, the board is very comfortable taking him at his word and trusting, okay, we trust what Chris's recommendations are as the village administrator. And if I tell them something of certain topics that I'm comfortable with them, they'll be, okay, Greg is Chris's assistant. We're comfortable taking his recommendation and implementing what Chris and I have asked them, or what we recommended that they implement. But a local law, again, that's you guys. That's not us in terms of best advocates. Particularly local law like this. Okay, so I think that for tonight, again, we can, and just wrapping all this up. So again, I do have to get to at least one more thing tonight, and we can worry about other stuff next month, because we have had a long night and it's been productive. But when we talk about legislation, these are the long drawn out conversations we have to have. So I will send out an email before I leave tonight, just so I get it out as soon as possible to all of you guys. Just polling, you know, a couple things I'm going to ask the question is that what's the best day that you guys can get out there, whether it be the 7th or the 21st. But also just as equally important, if not more important, honestly, is that enough time for you to do as the public outreach that you need to do in order to get and whoever it is that you know who can be there at this hearing. So those are the 2 things that I intend to when I send out the email, really kind of harp on to all of you guys. But now moving on from leaf blowers, because I think I've had enough of leaf blowers for one evening.
Wait, one other really quick question,
No.
just about the public hearing.
Yeah.
can we tell people that if they are uncomfortable speaking in person or they can't make the meeting, that they can submit written comments to the board?
Yes, you can. Yes, you can. So when I give the notices, yes, written comments can be submitted in advance. So you don't have to get up there and speak, but we can read the board. We can read written comments.
When
So
you,
great question.
when you send the email to our committee asking them about date, can you let them know, you know, that if you have, you know, friends, neighbors, whatever in the community that you know, are in, you know, think are going to be supporters and are interested in this, can you please, you know, let them know whatever, you know, about the public hearing, and if they're uncomfortable, just let them know that they can, because we might have a lot more luck in having people submit something in writing than having them to show up in a meeting and speak in public.
Yes. Okay, perfect. Thank you for that. I'm Debbie.
Sorry.
No,
Keep interrupting you.
I'm glad you brought that up because that was actually a very good question. So, and don't apologize for that. So just one thing, since it's our first meeting, there was a couple of things we want to discuss, events going forward with 2023, but we can discuss that in February, given the time we are at now. But one thing I just want to kind of broach this topic. Again, we can get more into it in February as well, but I just want to start the conversation about it because unfortunately we kind of have to. And I've had these conversations with Bridget already, but in terms of like meeting attendance and participation, so this is not really geared towards all of you on this call because all of you are pretty consistent. But right now we can have up to 12 members. We have 10 spots that are currently filled. So there have been times I said I had to reschedule because there's issues of quorum and so forth. So there are a couple of members I may have to ask in terms of who are currently active, if you guys still want to be active. That doesn't apply to anybody on this call. But the reason why I bring this up in terms of when we have events, sometimes it's just Bridget who's doing it, or maybe one or two other of our members. And of course, that's not fair to Bridget, who's constantly, when we have like our community cleanup day, or when we have our like our flower plantings or our seed exchange. So I want to just throw this at you guys in terms of how can we also, as ideas, we can boost some participation at events in terms of getting public in there, and what are ways that maybe you guys might want to get involved in terms of meetings. Because the way we have it on Village Code, I don't have the exact in front of me. I've been looking for it. I just wasn't able to find it throughout the day, to be honest, is that if you don't show up for a certain number of meetings, then we can ask you to leave. Now, I don't want to do that. Like I said, I'm not really gearing this towards any of you guys on this call because pretty much everyone here is very consistent and showing up the most in meetings. But these are things that we have to talk about because, again, just being honest, we have 10 members and half of you are here. And these are things that, again, when we talk about legislation, I mean, it would have been a lot easier to really kind of wrap this up if we had even 2 more members on this call. And again, we're not going to have a perfect attendance at all these meetings, but I just want to start this conversation just briefly in terms of when we have our events. I mean, what are other ways that you think would be easier for you guys to get involved? There are certain activities that you guys want to do, or certain events that maybe be more of interest that you can get more involved that way.
I mean, I'll just say for me, I used to go to all the events and I'm just like stuck with my health issues, and that's my
I
problem.
understand that. That's why, again,
Oh, I used to be very present. Sorry, I do my best. I know you know that.
Actually, I know we can be all know.
Totally understand that. No, we totally understand that.
Okay.
I think if there are people, and I don't know if there are people that really haven't attended any meetings for the past year and haven't responded to emails. I don't know who responds when you put things out, but as far as people who are committee members, I think it's a valid question to just say, hey, you're on the sustainability committee. We haven't seen you in a while. Are you still interested in serving? And then understand whether these people want to stay on the committee or they've already walked away from it, but they haven't just formalized that they've walked away. And as far as events, I know I try to go, but I don't really get there because I have conflicts. But but I think that's something that we should consider when we're planning these events, and we should hold ourselves accountable, I guess, to signing up and not leaving Bridget to be the only one to go. So if we say we're going to do a seat exchange, but nobody on the committee is able to commit to going and volunteering except for Bridget, then maybe we don't do it. Do you know what I mean? Like, I don't think it should all fall on one person, but I think as a committee, we should recognize that if we're going to do something, that we either are making an effort to do that as a committee, or if it's going to fall on just one person and that person doesn't want that burden, that we don't do that event. You know, I don't think it's fair to have everything fall on just one person, clearly.
For me as the Mac, you said, I as the liaison,
I
again,
understand.
I'm going to all these events myself. Again, I intend to be pretty much at all of them. Again, like I said, we're all gonna have conflicts at certain times. So again, no one should expect 100%, especially since you guys are unpaid volunteers, 100% of attendance for everything. But just how we can lighten the load, particularly for you guys here at meetings. I mean, the people who are on here, like you guys, I mean, you guys are the ones who pretty much show up to most of the meetings. I know what others may come like every now and then, but I know like but again, events, to be honest, it's mostly just Bridget. So again, I do, maybe it's a good point, Debbie, is that if we are going to plan these events, like especially when we get the scheduling, once we have it weeks and months in advance, something that I would like just to see is just getting the show of hands of who's actually going to be able to show up. I know Bridget
Exactly.
does a great job doing them the way she does them, and then we have a couple of members who may come sporadically at certain points throughout the different events that we're having. But it's like, for example, like at the Rye Brook birthday, we typically get a table. We weren't able to have one because I wasn't able to get enough participation from you guys in order for us to justify having one. And we should have one. Again, we should be able to have a table at these type of events, because a lot of the events that we're doing, or we're talking about equity legislation, and these are golden opportunities to really kind of engage residents more, to get maybe more new members for those who, either for the open spots that we have for the members who are kind of dropping off and maybe don't want to do this anymore, but also as a part of a public outreach efforts for the programs that we do have. So again, just a thought, and just some things we should start thinking about.
I think, Greg, and I'm partly at fault because I was pretty busy last year too, with kids applying to colleges and all that stuff and moving them in. So I missed a bunch of the events. Maybe when we set an event, instead of saying, okay, who can make it, 3 people have to commit to say you're the leaders of that event. And then anybody else, it's sort of like, okay, show of hands who can go, but things could fall off, but still those 3 will go. I think if we kind of make a commitment at the beginning of an event, then they're the leaders of that event.
No, I like that idea. That's certainly something I think is a pretty good suggestion. Anybody else have any thoughts? Just for now. Well, then again, just hang on, guys, for a minute. I'm going to stop the recording, but thank you for the public who will be looking at this later. Of course, thank you for you guys for your time tonight.